hosting this webinar on demystifying the CMHC funding. My name is Jo Devorsule. I'm with Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association, and we're really excited by the number of people that are interested in this webinar. We love being able to offer the free webinars. So thank you for that. We are offering ongoing education. So if you are not a part of our newsletter where we send out that information, please do join. We are 100% about sharing everything that you want to know about nonprofit housing in Manitoba and inspiration from around the world. And so with us today, we have got Kareem and Jeremy from Fairview Consulting. They're going to be sharing some intel of what we should be knowing about funding. And yeah, very helpful humans. They were at our conference at the trade show if you hadn't met them. Very impressive competition. I think they had over golf swings, which was really beautiful. I did not partake because I didn't want to, win. Anyway, as for questions, you can ask questions during the presentation, but bear in mind a lot of the questions likely will be answered. They have done this a few times. Any questions to go in the chat box, and we will have a question and answer period after the presentation, in which you can either raise your hand or type your question into the chat as well. And then we will be sending out follow-up information, people enrolled, of how to get a hold of Fairview Consulting, how to find future education through MAMFA. And you can also always email me. My email is social@mamfa.com, and I love telling people everything that they need to know. And if I don't know it, I will find someone that does. So let's welcome Kareem and Jeremy. Would you like to go ahead with your presentation?
Sure. Thank you again, Joe, Idarin, and team for putting this together. I'm going to share my screen. We have a few slides, obviously, that we're going to use as a guide through all this process. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. So let me know that you guys see the full screen now.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you again and welcome everyone. Good morning for the folks out west and maybe good afternoon for us here. We're based out of Moncton, New Brunswick, which is just shortly after 12. I'm going to go through the presentation today to talk a lot about, or as much as we can, about many funding options pertaining to CMHC and tie that a little bit more to how that might be helpful to specifically not-for-profit and the co-op sector, which we are fairly active in. So I'd like to start, this is the table of contact. Let's start obviously by presenting Fairview, who we are, our history, and in our discussion with the Manitoba Not-for-Profit Housing Association, obviously we made sure that we don't want this to be an infomercial. This is not necessarily to sell our services or any of that, but we want to explain to you our experience and background and what pertains to how we can help or how we can at least explain the housing, the funding project and our experience and the relevance in all that. We're going to talk about who we serve and some highlights in our past experience that brought us to this, and then we'll spend the bulk of it talking about not-for-profit and cooperative, and then we'll tie back down on how we position and all of that, and obviously open the floor for question and discussion. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible. With technology, as Joe said, I think the best way to take question and discuss about it is after the presentation, so we'll proceed after that with that. Fairview Consulting, we're a corporate finance firm, corporate finance and project management firm based out of New Brunswick, Canada. We have associates from New Brunswick all the way to BC, including Chalo Hancock, who is with us on the call today. He's actually physically present in Manitoba, and he helps us obviously with files there. Our specialty is we help private and non-private organization in both financing and project management to increase housing supply. When we say increase housing supply, is a bit generic, but mainly what we do is finance and project manage multi-residential developments. Obviously, for the private sector, which is our kind of DNA before we get into what we call a non-private. Non-private includes municipalities, not-for-profit, co-op housing, Aboriginal communities, and so on. The reason why we make this distinction when we get into the financing, we'll explain to you a little bit more because our approach with the all-in non-for-profit is different than that of when we deal with the profit organization. Our team is comprised by for the exec team, myself, Karim Viva, Jeremy Wallet is one of my partner sitting on the call here. Jacques Dubé is one of our associates. He's not on the call, unfortunately, today. And maybe we should add the picture of Chalo, who is representing us in Manitoba. We have other associates and employees. We're roughly around 20 right now, all in all. A small firm, but I'd like to believe we have a long reach in the financing and project management for not-for-profit and the profit side. So who do we serve? We serve mainly municipalities, private developers, non-for-profit, housing cooperative, and small and mid-size entities. So on this, I'll talk a little bit more about how we operate and more importantly, to tie it again on how we can talk about or we can potentially help in explaining CMHC. We offer our services in three main axes. One is in terms of debt. We help organizations secure debt. Two, in terms of equity, which is mainly in the private equity sector and so on. And three, in government funding. On the debt side, we are a licensed commercial mortgage broker, part of the Dominion Lending Network, specifically part of Dominion Lending for a city based out of London, Ontario. On the debt side, we do as a brokerage with Dominion Lending, we do anywhere between $2 to $3.2 billion lending a year, which position us to be the largest lending brokerage in the network. And the relevance for that is that gives us access to fairly competitive rate when it gets to commercial lending, which is less relevant to the not-for-profit and let's call it the non-private sector. But probably what is relevant is it gives us a positioning with CMHC that we work with them a lot. So on the debt side, one of the major products that we offer is what's called insurance financing, which actually could be used for not-for-profit and co-op. It's a program called MLI Select. We'll talk a little bit about it. But that position us in a way that we work a lot with CMHC and develop good knowledge and relationship with them. On the equity side, we do not much of that, quite frankly, with the not-for-profit and private equity and not-for-profit. Private equity is mainly for obviously for-profit entities. The third axis that is relevant, and I will draw a lot of parallel with previous experience we've had with municipality, is government funding, which ties to the not-for-profit and the co-op sector because we touch both sides. The lending side, obviously, because the financing will have some lending components, and it will have a government funding component. And when you say government funding, that is the three level of government: federal, provincial, and municipal. Okay, so on the government funding side, and we'll just do a quick highlight here on one of the projects we worked on. A couple of years ago, the federal government announced the Housing Accelerator Funds, which was a $4 billion fund that was announced to be distributed to municipalities to help increase housing supply. We were the largest supplier, at least in New Brunswick here and several other entities, whereby we represented several municipalities, 20 municipalities of the municipalities here in New Brunswick, and we ended up with a 44% success rate compared to the 31 point something and a national average. That quite frankly gave us quite a competitive edge and put us in a position where we learned how to work with the let's call it the non-private sector. And I'll explain why I'm referring to this specifically, because what we learned from that, there is a lot of correlation on how it works with the not-for-private sector. Specifically, when we started dealing with municipalities, we approached them and said, "Hey, can we help you get the funding for the half, which usually is anywhere between 2 million to sometimes over 10 million?" And we thought the answer would be yes. Let's jump on it. Let's get some money. The two or three municipalities we contacted to pressure test the idea. One of the main exceptions we received is that we don't have capacity to deal with all this. Yes, you get us all this money, but how we deal with all of this in terms of execution. The parallel that we draw from that and we learn from is very, very compatible with what we see in the not-for-profit and co-op sector. In a lot of cases, there are a lot of organizations, I'm not saying all of them, there are some not-for-profit and co-ops that are actually fairly large entities. They have their, staff and so on. But quite frankly, the majority that we deal with are, they have a certain amount of units. They want to either increase that amount or sometimes renovate. And we found a capacity issue whereby the board usually have great intention, but when it gets to funding and project management, the question is that where do we start? What's the relationship between program A, B, C, D? And thus, the reason of this webinar is to explain a little bit more all these programs, explain how they're intertwined, and hopefully we can add some value for you to see. So this gives you a bit of background as to why we're involved in the financing side, or how we got involved in the financing side, and obviously in the project management. Now, as far as the program that we're going to cover in this presentation, we will focus only and specifically on the program that are relevant to the not-for-profit and co-ops. I mentioned earlier MLI Select, which is actually not on this slide, but I can talk about it at the end, which is, it's available, of course, for the NPOs and co-ops. But as far as preference and where you can get the most value in how to finance your new multi-residential development, we're going to be talking about three main programs, which is the seed funding, the Affordable Housing Fund, which has different substreams as of November 22nd of last year. They made some changes, so we'll go through that. And the third and one of the most important one is Co-op Housing Development Program, the CHDP, which is probably one of the first formal funding, federal funding program that we've seen in 30 or 40 years, depending on who you talk to. We haven't been in business for that long, but we've had some feedback that the co-op housing sector has not been subject to a lot of help from the federal government. So we're happy to see that there is something that we can tap into. So in terms of seed funding, and the reason why we started by it, because in any project, the very first step is the pre-construction development stage, which is what we have seen could be actually one of the major roadblocks. Because once you pass that stage, usually you've had built already a good ecosystem, you already have a good group of consultants, and if you go through that phase, usually I'd like to believe you're a little bit more advanced than just exploring your options and see if the project is doable. And one of the hurdles is actually how to go through this pre-construction development stage, and mainly in financing. Sometimes you have a land, sometimes you don't even have a land. You have a need to build, 30 unit, 20 unit, 50 units, whatever that is, and we don't know where to start. Seed funding is one of the avenues that we tap into in conjunction with other provincial fundings. Even though here we will talk only about CMHC funding, but pretty much every CMHC funding is joined with some provincial funding. In Manitoba, we have only a couple of files right now that we're working on, so we're kind of going through the ropes with going through the ropes, probably not the best expression, but we were learning how to work with the provincial partners. And depending on where the project is, we have some contacts with local municipalities or regional municipalities to work with them in terms of either zoning, funding, or combination thereof. However, the lead financing programs are usually CMHC based. So for the pre-construction development stage, it's anything that has to do with feasibility studies, your survey, preliminary design, sometimes preliminary engineering, geotechnical, environmental, energy efficiency, and so on. There's at least 7 groups of subcontractors that any entities has to go through to get it to a level where we can actually submit an application for that's called the major funding, which is to fund the actual construction. In that stage, we still don't know whether you can put 20 units on the land, whether you can put 30, what is the best combination between how many affordables, how many non-affordables, square footage, all that kind of stuff. We don't necessarily need to come to a final conclusion at this stage, but there are definitely prerequisites such as survey. When we traveled through Manitoba, you guys are lucky that probably most of the land we saw is pretty flat and pretty even, but usually from engineering requirements, you need to see if you need some infill, drainage, all that kind of stuff, and any of that impacts your financing. Let's face it, we are mainly, our role is mainly to ensure doability of the project, and one of the biggest components is financing. Okay, energy efficiency, same thing. How are we going to factor that in? Especially energy efficiency is one of the criteria in all of the program we're going to talk about, and so on and so forth, square footage and all that kind of stuff. So the very first thing we tap into seed funding. Seed funding was it's a funding that has existed for years. They sometimes shut it down for either months or years, started back. Sometimes they change the name. So in 2023, they announced it again. I don't know if we have the exact amount here. No, I don't have the exact amount of how much they have in seed funding, but when they announced it in March 2024, sorry, not 2023, there is a component of non-repayable. So they give you up to $500,000 to do all of these pre-construction studies. One component is $150,000 of non-repayable. That component has elapsed in 24 business days from the time that they announced it. There was a big rush from across Canada, and it's no longer available, or at least until they announce more. We might see something in March and April, but notwithstanding all the uncertainty around the political landscape and so on, just from pure financial perspective, there is still the $350,000 interest-free repayable loan that is available, and that is, I'd like to believe, very helpful in many cases, even though some entities we deal with do have cash, ranges from few 10,000, few 10,000 to a few 100,000. There is always a case to consider financing those pre-construction development costs, because anything you can finance is better than you spend it out of pocket. In that 350,000, usually we try to seek around 100,000 in the first stage. It's very rare that we have project that needs more than 100,000 in the pre-construction development stage for the scales that we're talking about, anything from 20 unit to 100 unit. Again, it's on a case-by-case basis, but usually $100,000 is what we seek. And one of the main reason is that we know, again, CMHC pretty well. We know that if we position it in under 100,000, it doesn't go to a higher level of approval. Approval is at a lower level of underwriting, and it's a lot faster. We build a relationship with the local agents we deal with, and usually by the time we apply for this, we are pretty sure that we will get the money. And again, this is in conjunction with any provincial funding that we can get from pre-construction, and also municipal. In some cases, they have funding for that. So for this, again, eligible activities is for all of the needs assessment, financial feasibility, sometimes even incorporation document for entities that are not even incorporated, design, and so on. The second fund that we're going to talk about is actually the funds that we're going to use to actually finance the development. The two major funds are the Affordable Housing Fund and the CHDP, which is the Co-op Housing Development Fund. For the Affordable Housing Fund, they made some changes on November 14, 2024. For those who have been in the scene for a little while, this fund used to be called the Co-Investment Fund. They changed the name, rebranded it, I believe, in early 2023. They increased the budget. I think we're talking about 14 point some billion here. Yes, I have it on the next slide. It's a $14.6 billion budget for this, and they split it into two streams. One is for construction of affordable housing, and the other one is what they call a rapid housing stream, which again, they kind of mirrored another program that used to exist for only rapid housing that was only for Aboriginal on-reserve housing. They shut that down mid, I think, 2023 or late 2023. And then when they made the change in 2024, it became part of the stream. So now co-ops and not-for-profit are eligible for both sides. One of the a couple of criteria I want to mention at this level. One is the Affordable Housing Fund requires as a prerequisite some kind of partnership with the two other level of government. So this is a financial from the federal level. They require a partnership with either the provincial and or municipal level. Partnership can take many ways. So if the province has a program that finances affordable housing, and typically, obviously, they have tight relationship with CMHC and they know the detail, you're pretty much grandfathered in. So if we get the province with us to finance their portion in terms of affordable housing, that is considered a partnership. Same thing as the municipal level. If we get any kind of grants, property tax easements, waiver of development charge, waiver of permits, anything we can get from the province, from the municipality is considered a partnership. So that's one of the first criteria. The second criteria is that this program, any what we call direct lending program, which is the Affordable Housing Program, and the CHDP, which we'll talk about later. And there is another program called Apartment Construction Loan Program. It's not in this slide. I'll just refer to it very quick. Those are in the direct lending program, and the direct lending program is what they call competitive program, as opposed to when we talk about the insurance program that I referred to earlier. Insurance program are merit-based program. Insurance program are a lot for the for-profit sectors, for-profit developers. I mentioned briefly that because it might be a good option in some cases for the not-for-profit and co-op, but in the majority of cases, we want to look at these programs, the affordable housing, the CHDP, because they have a big portion of non-repayable. Anything that is geared only for the for-profit sector usually don't have any non-repayable. Not-for-profit and co-ops enjoy, quite frankly, a good positioning in terms of the program that were designed in a way that there is a portion of non-repayable. The reason why, it's because obviously anything that will involve not-for-profit and co-op housing typically have some social connotation to it. Typically is serving either, some minority or visible minority, or providing some affordable housing or combination thereof. So the reason why the federal government is providing for non-repayable portion is to decrease your capital base. So if your project would have been a $10 million had you been a private developer, if they provide you, let's say, anywhere between 10 to 40% non-repayable, your capital cost base right there decreases from $10 million to, let's say, all the way down to $6 million. So your debt servicing, instead of you servicing a $10 million loan, you're servicing a $6 million loan. Your monthly payments are lower, which enables you to collect less rent than the market rent and still meet the requirement. So that's why usually we're kind of trying to talk about these two programs mainly, but the other programs are still available to the not-for-profit, and we can dive into them on a case-by-case basis needed. The point I wanted to make and the common link between all of these programs, whether it's insured program or the direct lending program, is there are three main criteria they look at: affordability, energy efficiency, and accessibility. And there is usually a point system that will give you points. And when I mentioned earlier about this program as being competitive program, that means that when we submit the application, they stack them and compare them with other applications across Canada and award the projects to the most deserving. Unlike the programs that are geared for the private sector, they have a minimum. If you reach that minimum, you're, I don't want to call guarantees, but you're eligible for that financing. The reason being, obviously, is it's a purely commercial program whereby private developers are geared to do profits, and their requirements are a lot higher. They have personal guarantees on their own asset, their own house, and all kind of stuff. Whereas in the private and the not-for-profit sector in general, including co-ops, there is less of that. I'll talk a little bit more about the requirement, but there is a lot less of that. So to go back to the affordable housing program, it's a $14.6 billion program. It was a 1.7 billion at a certain point. They increased it to 2.4, and then as of recent, they increased it to 14.6. So there's quite a bit of funding eligible for that. For the new construction stream, new construction, they call it new construction community housing stream substream, which is very similar to what used to be called the co-investment fund. We can get financing up to 95% of the cost. And that 95% would include a loan grant, they call it loan grant, or a forgivable loan, which is the part of what we call non-repayable in general. And there is a repayable loan that be in the form of a mortgage. Contribution, there is something that they call contribution, which is technically a different application in itself, but there are three components that you can use in order to reach the 95% that we refer to. For the maximum forgivable loan, which is a non-repayable, this is an important criteria I wanted to mention. The maximum doesn't necessarily mean the amount is grandfathered, but the maximum is 40%. There are many formulas behind that, how to get that. The thing that I want to share with you as a good news is that not only when they did the change in November, they decreased pretty much the requirements in terms of engineering requirement as to how much efficiency you need to meet and all that. But as of very recent, this is in January, they decreased, they changed something that used to have a maximum of $75,000 per door. per for the affordable housing program. Now there is no maximum. They pretty much do a formula for up to 40%, and it's based on how much you need to meet the DCR, which is debt coverage ratio. So pretty much the amount of money they give you as a non-repayable is on an as per need basis, up to 40%, which is a lot helpful. This might not sound like very, I guess, palatable, especially for those who have been exposed to this at the very first stage. But from experience, we've done files before. This gives you a lot more funding. When it used to have a max of $75,000 per door, and still they had 40% max. That, if you work out the numbers, you'll be at roughly $230,000 a door, roughly, and you max out your 40% contribution. Whereas now, when they remove the 75,000, because in the real world, sometimes your door costs 300,000, 350, a lot more if you are in, Vancouver and Toronto and Halifax, right? So then the 40% gives you access to a lot more repayable. The terms of the affordable housing funds are 10 or 10, 20 years term. Terms meaning that what you only commit to as the first stage, and in a lot of cases, all of those terms are reconductible, so you can extend it pretty much all the way to 50 years. Amortization is up to 50 years. This is one of the major advantage of this program, whereby you start right off the bat with 50 years amortization. Other program, you start by 40, and you have to earn your way up by having more accessibility, more affordability, more energy efficiency. For the direct lending program, you start by 50, which give you, again, a lower debt servicing amount per month, which enable you to charge less rent than market rent, so as you can obviously afford to meet the DCR. And the third important factor is that the interest rate are pegged to what we call GOC, to Government of Canada bond, which is probably in the just under 3% in nowadays, compared to the commercial rate of around 5% if you are a private developer. Again, that gives you an advantage in being able to have a lower payment. A little detail here, I want to mention that they allow you up to 75% for non-residential space in terms of lending. I want to talk about it a little, only to explain, not only you're allowed up to 75% loan to value or loan to cost, sorry, for the non-residential space, but I want to open up the kind of window to explain that they actually allow non-residential space in those multi-residential development up to 30% of either of both the cost or square footage. So if you're doing a 100,000 square foot building on many stories, you're allowed to have the first level as a non-residential. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is in some cases when we're dealing with not-for-profit and co-op, they ask, can we have space in the bottom to have daycare, library, head office for our organization, communal space, all that kind of stuff. It is allowed for as long as obviously in that underwriting process when we submit the application, obviously you can't exceed 30,000 square feet, otherwise it becomes commercial, and CMHC don't get involved in commercial financing. That's why their ratios are lower. CMHC obviously are based for social purposes. They want to help obviously multi-residential housing, but they do allow you up to 75%. The only thing that we need to keep in mind is that if you guys are considering doing space for any of what I mentioned, daycare, church, any of that, the revenue coming from that and the commercial side is I'm gonna say judged or the criteria for that are a little bit more stringent only for the commercial side. So they give you only 75% loan to cost for that side. And the ratios are a little bit higher in terms of how much revenue we need to justify. So in that case, so if you're putting a daycare, obviously we want to lease that to a daycare, even if it's owned by you guys or by another entity, and we need to factor in the revenues and all that. So I just wanted to open a quick kind of parenthesis to say that even though it's a multi-residential project for both the affordable housing program and the co-op housing program, they allow for a commercial. For the affordable housing fund, the substream rapid housing, it's very similar to what I mentioned earlier. It's almost $1 billion budget, but it's mainly for construction of shelter, transitional housing, and supportive housing. The other, let's call the regular stream of co-op housing, is for anything else. Pretty much everything what I I believe you guys do, which is renting to either people from the community, member of your co-ops if you are co-op, any minority that you are serving. We're dealing with entities that are serving elderly with reduced mobilities. We have another group in Quebec that they actually serve women in distress. They have a school where they teach them life skills and all that kind of stuff, and then they are building with us a complex where they're going to offer housing for them. We have a group that deal with Black African, sorry, Black Canadian descendant, and so on and so forth. So we got the idea. So anything else that is housing in general, include affordable housing, is dealt with Stream 1. Stream 2 is mainly for shelters, transitional housing, and supportive housing. Basically, with people that have the most urgent needs. This one is very, very similar, except that we can go up to 100% of the eligible cost, and the applicants can apply for contribution only loan or repayable, and it all depends on the needs. The new formula that they have, unlike the private sector, whereby you need to justify that you're going to make enough money to cover it. In the new way of underwriting the new affordable housing stream, as long as you meet the minimum ratios of 1.0, you're eligible. And 1.0, in very simple term, is that they want to make sure that for every $100 you collect in rent, you don't spend more than $100, including some reserves for fund reserves and other things that we can cover a little bit more. The third stream in the affordable housing program, and I'd like to go probably a little faster so as I don't go over the 40 minutes we allocated, is the renewal, which I'm going to go through. It's relatively similar, but the reason why we are mentioning this is, again, in a lot of the not-for-profit, especially co-op housing that are existent. A lot of the co-op houses, they have housing that dates from 30, 40 years sometimes. In a lot of cases, it might need some renovation. So there is this program that could be a very good candidate to help in the renovation. And similarly, they're requiring a partnership with the second or third level of government, and it needs to meet the minimum criteria in terms of affordability, energy efficiency, and accessibility. They changed the program for the renovation. I'm going to just add one more quick thing that is important in the change they did in November. They used to mandate a minimum requirement of accessibility and energy efficiency. They removed that, even though the energy efficiency and accessibility still exist in the point system. They removed the minimum. I'll explain a little bit more so as it's not confusing. Usually in renovation, every time you're talking about renovation and you're talking about meeting a new energy efficiency requirement, the implied assumption in most cases, can't get into all the engineering details, but in most cases implies that you need to have displacement of tenants. If you want to improve your energy efficiency, you're talking about heat pumps, you're talking about new windows, sometimes even new insulation, all that kind of stuff. And that was very prohibitive for pretty much all the client, except in the private sector, because it's usually the exception is we don't have any place to put the current tenants. So obviously we can't put them out for 6 months or 3 months or whatever it takes to do these renovation. Now they removed the minimum. So that means that you don't have to meet those minimum requirements. You can meet the points by other ways. So that opens the door to doing renovation without having to displace tenants. But if you want to reach higher points, especially in energy efficiency, and if that implies that you need to obviously do extensive renovation and remove the tenants, unfortunately, the challenge is still there. But at least they remove barriers that at least enable us to look at project and say, okay, let's look at what you guys want to do. Can we do this without having to displace tenants? Can we meet the points and run with it? The rest is very similar. We can reach up to 95%, 50 years amortization, very competitive interest rate, and so on. Yeah, we covered this, so this pretty much what we're talking about. There is another point here, actually, in the slide is for the contribution only. Even if it's a renovation, there is many criteria that determine how you can be eligible for a non-repayable portion, but even for the renovation, especially for the renovation that is geared to increase energy efficiency, there is a non-repayable portion that you can access to part of this program. So not only you renovate and the loan is over 50 years, but you can only have a non-repayable, so even your loan decreases in terms of how much you're going to repay. The third program I'm going to talk about for the probably the next 5, 7 minutes and then open the floor for discussion is the CHDP. CHDP, probably the main variables I want to probably highlight is co-op housing development program is for co-op housing. So if you are a not-for-profit, you're eligible to all the other programs that we mentioned earlier. The only exception is co-op housing development program that goes only one way. So if you are a co-op housing a housing cooperative, you can access the co-op housing program. You can access the not-for-profit the affordable housing program. You can access the seed funding and any other funding I mentioned earlier, MLI Select, apartment construction loan program, pretty much any funding available. If you are a not-for-profit, you can access all of them except the co-op housing program. So that is a distinction I wanted to make sure that is very clear. In terms of co-op, anything that is non-distributive co-op is eligible. Obviously, housing co-ops are eligible, but if you are a co-op, let's say agricultural co-op and or I don't know, even religious or whatever other social vocation, and you want to build housing, you don't have to be a housing co-op. That might require you to do some changes in the bylaws to obviously legislate how you're gonna deal with building membership, charge rent, which they call members contribution, all that kind of stuff. But you don't have to create a new co-op. You can still apply for this. The program is for 1.5 billion dollars in loans. The CMHC will fund up to 100% in this case, and they will give you up to a third of the total amount in non-repayable. Even though on paper it sounds like a third is less than 40% that you would be eligible under the other program, because the formula is quite complicated. And quite frankly, I think at this stage for this webinar, I don't know if we're supposed to go to all, the level of details of how you get to whether you're 30% or 40% or how much you're eligible for. There is a lot of point system and equation, literally a mathematical equation to figure out how much you're eligible for. But one of the things we do if we are involved or if you are on your own is you should definitely consider both before even deciding which one you go, and do the math and do literally the case and analysis and studies to figure out which one is better. Because the co-op housing program, one of the advantages that if you are a co-op, there is less demand on it. So unlike the affordable housing program, they're pretty much available for everyone. The other, I guess, I don't want to call it con, but factor that is not as friendly or user friendly compared to the affordable housing program is the co-op housing program. They opened an application window from I think July 15th last year to I believe September 15th. They opened it for a couple of months. As we speak, the application window for the co-op housing program is closed, but we are working on probably at least half a dozen co-op housing, because we know that they're going to open one now. They said winter of 2025. It could be anytime soon, and they will probably open it for 60 days. So first come, first serve, and it's you have to be ready for that. The affordable housing program, the other program I mentioned earlier, I probably didn't mention this, but it's what they call continuous intake program. Whenever you're ready, you can apply. This one, there is an application window. So the couple of, I guess, restriction for this program is that if you are not a not-for-profit only, you're not a co-op, you're not eligible for this, and the application window is a short window. However, there is a lot less demand on the co-op housing program. So again, there isn't one formula that fits all. It's on a case-by-case basis. We need to determine what is the best for you. Similar terms as far as what you're looking at. It's amortization 50 years, two-thirds of the loan or two-thirds of the costs are by a loan, the rest is non-repayable. And the forgiveness of that loan of the non-repayable portion is over 20 years, and all what they ask of you of those 20 years is to submit reports annually for the rent roll, saying that you kept the portion of the rent that we said we're going to keep affordable. You want to just show that you kept that. And for the folks that have been doing this for 30 or 40 years, especially the one that started way back then when similar program back then from Canada were in place, I think that you were used to this at least the first 20, 30 years that you need to demonstrate that. One important factor as far as the co-op housing development program, they have minimum requirement as far as to how many units you can apply for based on how big is the community that you guys are applying for the housing development. So if you are what they call a large urban center, over 100,000 residents, they require at least 75 units. They don't want to be dealing with the smaller sizes, especially with what is going on now in terms of housing crisis in Canada. They made that very clear that they want to look at larger project for small and medium urban sizes, which I believe most of the center we deal with are in that category, from 10,000 resident to 99,000 resident. You need at least 30 units. And for rural, remote, and indigenous entities, it's on a case-by-case basis. However, to put things in perspective, based on what we see from CMHC, unless you show needs, and especially Aboriginal entities, they usually have, a lot more openness to dealing with exception with Aboriginal entities. But if you are a not-for-profit or a co-op, actually, sorry, in this case, a co-op, and you want to do something in a rural area and you want to do 5 units, you may or may not be in the top of the list. So I don't want to say that we want to rule it out in all the cases, but they do want to look at projects that will add a significant amount in housing supply. This is the last slide, and then we'll open it up for discussion. The reason why I kind of want to tie back to our role is to do a parallel of what we've done with the municipalities. So when we got involved with the municipalities, instead of just packaging the file and get the money and leave, which is what we do on the private side, for the non-private side, which is municipality, co-op, not-for-profit, and so on, we are pretty much a partner. We help from A to Z, especially in the pre-construction development stage, where we've seen there is a need of capacity. So we coordinate everything with all of the subcontractor. We ask them for their quotes. We actually get the quotes. We engage them to do the work. And when we say we work for the not-for-profit or co-op, so we don't make decisions. Usually either the board or the ED or the appointed person is the one who directs us, but we do actually the work. So as we obviously avoid that sometimes a lot of time wasted between going to the provincial government, federal government, where do we start first? Do I do an appraisal first? Do I do the design first? All that kind of stuff. So we will pretty much do all the hand holding at that stage. And actually, even after we apply for the loan, we help manage the project all the way to substantial completion in terms of project, and all the way to substantial occupancy, which is 75% of the unit being occupied. And in that case, even though we are not a construction firm, we don't advertise ourselves as a construction firm, we help in actually sourcing the right resources, whether it be a GC, or if sometimes the co-op you want to use their own members. In a lot of cases, they encourage their members to be involved. Well, definitely we prioritize that. And any missing link, we go in the market with our ecosystem, whether it be anything from lawyers, realtors, consultant, accountant, tax advisors, engineers, architect, anything that needs to be, hired, we help in coordinating all that. Um, I know it's a lot of info in a short period of time. I hope that this has added, a little bit more clarity. As we mentioned earlier, Joe will share our contact info, even if it's for question. Again, this is not necessarily to sell our services, even though we would love to help if there is a need to help. But if you have any question as far as financing or even project management, anything, please reach out, and if we can help, we will help. Just one last thing I want to say. We didn't talk a lot about your specific provincial programs. This session was more about the CMHC lending, whereas CMHC lending is heavily tied to the provincial financing in general, whether it's loan or grant, and municipal loans or grant. In Manitoba, again, we're kind of, I don't want to call it infant stage. We have a couple of files, and we flew there physically. We were very engaged. Obviously, we have a physical presence there by way of Chalo, which actually we met at the conference, and we were fortunate to hire him, and he's working with us right now on site. But we are in the process of actually working out a lot of detail with the provincial government and the municipality, depending on where that is. However, we're not new to this. Actually, some of the municipalities are our client. We help them actually structure all of the policies, zoning, change in zoning, change in policies, incentive programs, and so on. So we have good track records in that. And one of the associates I presented in the beginning, Jacques Dubé, he works with us actually pretty much on a frequent basis. And he used to be general manager of the city of Halifax. He was also general manager of city of Moncton here. He was appointed in many positions at the federal level and provincial level, mainly intergovernmental affairs and files that has to do with the municipalities and increase of housing supply, infrastructure, and stuff like that. So we have pretty good connection across Canada when it gets to working with the second and third level of government. And again, if we can direct you in any way we can to help you, if you are not our client, we'd love to do so. If you're working with us, obviously we'll take care of all that. So with that being said, it's 12:45. We allocated 40 to 45 minutes, so I think we are around that time. And we wanted to probably open up the floor for maybe 15, 20 minutes of discussion, question, if you guys have anything that you would like to ask.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Kareem, for sharing that information. That was very helpful. I did have a question previously if the slides can be shared with people that were participating. I know we're recording it, so hopefully that's okay.
Absolutely. We'll send you the PDF, and
I just
obviously we'll
realized I'm
have
kind of
people.
putting you on the spot. I apologize for that.
No, this is completely, and it's very
Okay,
common. We've
perfect.
done many of these presentations for many
Yes,
association municipalities and all that, and very common. We send the PDF, and again, we would love to help.
perfect. So that is one of the questions answered. And then you're also welcome to raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question directly. Otherwise, I will be reading some from the chat box here. From Amanda, is that under the AHF, New Construction Community Housing Substreams? It says that municipalities are eligible for some funding. What kind of projects have you seen approved or applied for from municipalities?
Good question, Amanda. I'll actually give you a little bit of, I guess, observation from what we're seeing in the market. We deal a lot with the municipalities in the HAF, the other fund, okay? For the new construction stream, we don't have any municipality that hired us to directly fund them to build multi-residential. However, we do have three clients now that we're working with, and potentially one out west in BC that we're not confirmed yet that we can work with, whereby the municipality created a not-for-profit under their umbrella. So in a lot of cases, what we have seen in the last probably 20 to 30 years, most municipalities, I'm not going to say all, there's exception. Calgary is one of them. Calgary has a big department where they own housing. I think Vancouver also own housing, but a lot of the small mid-sized municipalities don't want to own housing. But we've seen that start changing lately. So we have not seen municipalities applying directly for funding, but we do have at least three files whereby municipality created a not-for-profit. They put a couple of councils on the board of that not-for-profit and other obviously community leaders, and we help them fund under that. The common link is obviously the municipality in itself will help in some cases. They give sometimes financial incentives, break on property tax, and any of that. And usually when the municipality is in the picture, that definitely puts a lot of weights when we talking to the province. And needless to say, when we talking to the feds, it brings a lot more. So to answer your question, Amanda, I have not seen a file personally, or at least in Fairview, whereby municipality is funding directly housing, whereby they own it in their own balance sheet. But we've been seeing it more often than not now, where they get involved with a not-for-profit or they create a not-for-profit and finance housing development.
Same.
So I hope that answered your
No,
question.
even just the you saying that, Calgary and Vancouver that they own and operate housing. I actually, so I work for the municipality of Brandon, like the city of Brandon, and that's new to me that cities are owning and operating housing. I didn't know that. So,
So for Calgary, they have specifically the gentleman's name is Jaden Tate. He runs a not-for-profit that is actually financed by the city of Calgary. I forgot the name of it, and we've had a discussion with them actually to see if we can help them with some project. They have pretty actually substantial operation whereby they used to fund down payments for buying housing for their clients. In the last year and a half, they started owning apartments. So they have, I don't know exact numbers, but few hundreds. Okay. And we've heard a similar exercise in Vancouver whereby municipalities are getting involved with not-for-profit to own
mm,
housing. So
interesting.
we can do an intro if you want, if you are asking for some kind of experience, best practice, and all that kind of stuff. We can do an intro to Jaden Tate. Jaden has been in the scene for, I think, 14, 15 years in the
Mm,
kind of not-for-profit sector. And
okay.
I think they're pretty well advanced in that. They've done several projects, and I think they're doing one now downtown Calgary, actually. And it's not a secret because it's public knowledge. It's everywhere in LinkedIn. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Thank you.
Joe, we have another question. I don't know if you want me to run with it or.
You're muted, you.
Oh, okay. Well, our
Sorry,
big question we
I
have.
was trying to remember not to make any interrupting sounds while Amanda was speaking. Yes, if you are able to answer, that would be great.
Sure. Actually, I need to read it. We had a question from Martha. What are ways you work for municipality? Do you work with developer from a particular municipality or CDC, which is a community development corporation, with council members on the board that is wanting to bring some senior housing? What are the steps to get connected to you, and is there upfront cost? Okay. So the ways we work with municipalities now, we have different funding stream. There's a funding stream we spoke about earlier very briefly, which is HAF, the $4 billion, whereby the municipality actually is our client. They hire us and we apply for the money for them. And when we get the money, we help them implement all of those housing programs. We do also work with the municipality in the capacity, as I mentioned earlier, whereby either they have private developers or not for profit and they want to build housing, and we help those clients with the municipality access the funds and manage the project. What are the steps to get connected? We will share our contact information with you. As far as the cost, we can probably share it more in a one-on-one interface, but we can explain in full transparent way. Our costs are a lot mirrored to the private sector, whereas in the private sector, when we finance projects, usually are a lot success-based. We get the money, we get paid. We don't get the money, we don't get paid. There is only a small portion of upfront fee, we call it retainer, and that is usually when there is a construction project. In your guys' cases, most of the file we deal with in not-for-profits, usually construction project management. So there's an amount that we charge in the beginning, and that amount we split it to smaller amount, $5,000. Actually, I can share it here, $5,000 when we start the file, and another amount of $20,000 in the pre-construction development of stage, and that is contingent to us getting actually the money to the pre-construction development stage. So there is some exposure, and quite frankly, we want to make sure that the entities are skin in the game, they're engaged. We don't want to get in the scenario whereby after 6 months or a year the board changed and they say, we don't want to do this. We want to make sure that they are engaged. And the other portion is success-based, a percentage on either the non-repayable or repayable that we get you. Those we can discuss about them again on a one-on-one basis. But this formula seemed to be very, very appealing, at least to all of the NPOs that we're working with, whereby we've seen other consultants, they charge, and then we're not saying anything bad about anyone. They all have a very good value, but our way is that we don't charge you consulting fees and leave. We're with you, and our vested financial success is in seeing the money come into you and obviously seeing the project completed. So this is roughly our cost. And you have an example for BC non-for-profit working for municipalities. That's what I mentioned earlier. That's the organization. Actually, I can find their name now. I'll go on LinkedIn quick. And I hope Jaden is okay with me advertising his organization. I'll get you the name of organization. Dates. Oops, just give me a second. Or Jerry, if you can access the name quicker than me, that will help.
But I think does Jaden has some project in BC or only Calgary?
Alberta, sorry. Jaden is in Alberta. Thank you. Yeah, I mixed them up. So in BC, I don't have the name of the entity. No. Yeah. Are your fees covered under seed funding that people can get through either CMHC? Yes. The retainer fee is obviously covered under CMHC as a consultant to do the business plan and the pre-construction development management, and even our fees during the construction are covered as project management. So they're all part of the fees that we finance. So we self-finance. What else here I can see? This is very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, so Eric, sorry, asked to share the slides. I will definitely share the slide with you through the association. Yeah, we're here for a few more minutes. I don't know if you have any other questions or
One other
comments.
question I had is you talked about like the CMHC funding that you are familiar with accessing. I'm assuming, also with MHRC in Manitoba that you'd be familiar with their funding. And I'm just wondering if you're also familiar with like the different Indigenous streams of funding that are out there for housing.
Yes. So MHRC, actually, I want to make correction. You said you are familiar. We are familiar with. We're not as expert as other province where we have many projects. So I just want to be obviously transparent that in Manitoba we've been there since probably mid last year. So we're working with the provincial level and we're learning. But again, we have enough. I'd like to believe knowledge in other areas where we can mirror that and run with it. CMHC definitely. We're very familiar with other funding streams. Aboriginal, they have their own section. There is
Mm,
Section 95 actually for Aboriginal funding, which existed and will exist probably for as long as there is funding from CMHC, plus any other program that we refer to, such as your not-for-profit, the affordable housing programs, the CHDP. They have, I'd say, different set of criteria where they favor, not favor probably not the good term, but there is more flexibility with Aboriginal on reserve and off reserve funding. And also in terms of the timelines for application and stuff like that, there is usually much more flexibility. And so is the case, by the way, for visible minority. There is many groups of visible minority, single parents, visible minor ethnicity, certain groups. There is a list of visible minority defined by Canada, whereby if you are part of any of those, you will have again, favorites probably not the best term, but you'll have a set of criteria that would enable you to access the funding probably better than otherwise.
mm,
Yeah. So for Aboriginal lending, there is a Section 95 for on-reserve funding that is definitely, available. And they've had the rapid housing stream, I think a couple of years ago, that went by pretty fast. There is a couple of other programs right now that are just for Aboriginal lending. And if you wanna probably discuss about it a little bit more, in another discussion, and we want to know a little bit more about the project. So if you're talking about just multi-res, that's one thing. If you're talking about senior housing, there's, other way to look at it. If you're talking about shelters, that's a different story, and so on and so forth.
okay, thank you.
I don't see any other question in the chat. I don't know if Joe, you want to make any other comments or.
Yeah, I'm just checking here and I'm not seeing anything else either. But you have shared your information on screen already, and we'll share it again in a follow-up email so people can contact you. Anything else you want people to know about your services screen?
No, again, don't want to do necessarily an infomercial, but we would love to help, if we can. And again, as I mentioned, even if you want to just ask question without engaging us, we will definitely love to help. So thank you again, Joe and the team for putting this together. And yeah, I'd like to say enjoy the day, but we are at minus 18 here. I don't know about you guys, but let's try to enjoy the day whichever way.
Enjoy being indoors and being housed, which is a great a great
Yeah,
segue from
amen.
that. Yeah, really. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for gathering and being here for the information. We do have more webinars on the horizon, including one with Manitoba Housing, which I believe is going to be next week. And I'll send a follow-up with the details about this, including the recording and the presentation, as well as links to what we have coming up next. So once again, thank you so much. And feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions that you would like answered. We're very eager to help. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Bye-bye.